The sentence echoed in Michael Carter's head long before he ever spoke it out loud. Right now, though, as he stood in the biting winter wind of downtown Athens, Georgia, with his son's hand slipping in his own, he felt the weight of something worse than a gamble. He felt the weight of slipping time. He'd run out of quarters for the parking meter. Again. And the courthouse deputy was already walking down the sidewalk, with his ticket book open boots hitting the pavement in that steady, merciless rhythm that always made Michael feel like he was being hunted by life itself. "Dad," 6-year-old Leo asked, tugging his coat sleeve. "Are we in trouble?" Michael forced a breath, then a smile. "Not yet, buddy. Let's hurry." But they didn't hurry fast enough. The ticket was slapped onto his windshield before he even reached the car, another fine he couldn't afford. Another reminder that survival didn't care how hard he worked. The cold cut through his jacket as he pulled the envelope from the wiper blade. The paper crackled in his hand, thin, cheap, and somehow still heavier than any weight he carried on his back. Leo watched quietly, his breath fogging in the air. "It's okay," Michael said, but his voice cracked on the second word. Inside the courthouse lobby, where the heater rattled like an old man coughing, Michael waited in line to pay the ticket. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, exhaustion chewing at his bones. He'd worked the overnight shift at the warehouse, then dropped Leo at school, then gone straight to his second job, sweeping floors at a diner. Now he was here fighting losing battles one form at a time. A bulletin board sagged against the wall nearby, covered with yard sale flyers, lost cat posters, and faded church announcements. Nothing unusual, nothing hopeful. Except one slip of paper hung crookedly near the bottom. Yellowed, corners curled. No one seemed to notice it, no one but him. He read it once, then twice. Property sale, $1. Address 1437 Hollow Ridge Drive. Abandoned estate, county transfer program. Buyer assumes back taxes. $1. One single dollar. His heartbeat thudded once hard enough that he physically felt it. This had to be a mistake, or a scam, or a joke someone posted to entertain themselves watching desperate people drool over impossible opportunities. But Leo saw the shift in his expression and stepped closer. "What is it, Dad?" Michael hesitated. "I think something strange." He pulled the paper down and held it up to the overhead light. The address meant nothing, but he knew from the tone of the posting that this wasn't some cute fixer-upper. This would be one of those houses the town whispered about, one of those places people avoided. He knew all about avoiding places. He'd spent years avoiding the apartment complex where he used to live with Leo's mother, avoiding the neighbors who heard the screaming, avoiding the pitying looks afterward. But maybe he was tired of avoiding things. Maybe he was ready to walk towards something again. After paying the ticket, he drove back to the rundown studio apartment he and Leo called home. The radiator hissed like it was angry, and the upstairs neighbor was once again shouting at someone over the phone. Their lives compacted into one small room felt even smaller now. Becca Ramirez knocked on their door just as Michael sank onto the couch. She lived 3 doors down, a single mom herself, pragmatic and sharp-eyed. "You look like a man who got stepped on today," she said. "Just another Tuesday." She stepped inside without waiting, she always did, and handed Leo a snack before turning to Michael. "You want to talk about it?" He held up the $1 property notice. Her eyebrows nearly jumped off her face. "Oh no. No, no, no. Don't even think about whatever insanity is brewing in your skull right now." "It's probably nothing," he said. "But what if it isn't?" Becca crossed her arms. "People disappear in deals that sound that good." Michael shrugged. People disappear in deals that sound bad, too. She opened her mouth, closed it, then let out a long sigh. You're really considering this? I just want to look, and that, she said, pointing at him, is how horror movies start. Michael almost laughed. Almost. But the truth sat in his throat like a stone. A man with no options will look anywhere for one. That night after Leo fell asleep on the pull-out sofa, Michael stared at the paper again. Hollow Ridge Drive. He typed it into his phone. Pictures came up, grainy, outdated, unattractive. The house was big, much too big for him and Leo, probably much too big for anyone to handle. The kind of place dreams went to die. And yet he couldn't stop looking. He whispered the number out loud, $1. What could he lose? He was already losing everything slowly. He set the phone down and finally said the sentence aloud, the one that had haunted him all afternoon. It's only $1. What's the worst that could happen? The next morning, he drove east out of downtown Athens. Leo sat in the back seat coloring dinosaurs with the intensity of someone saving the world with crayons. The road stretched ahead, gray asphalt bordered by winter-bitten trees and long-forgotten farmland. As the houses grew farther apart, Michael felt something shift in the air. A quiet, a heaviness. Then the GPS announced, "Arrived." There was no grand driveway, no sign, just a mailbox leaning sideways like it had given up years ago. Grass and vines swallowed the path leading toward a hulking shape half hidden in the pines. The mansion, if you could call a rotting carcass of a once beautiful home a mansion. Leo pressed his nose to the window. Dad, is that our new house? Michael's throat tightened. Not yet. Not even close. But even through the decay, broken windows, warped siding, a porch sagging like a wounded beast, Michael felt it. A pulse. A presence. A strange sense that the house was waiting. For what? Or for who? He didn't know. He stepped out of the car. The cold bit at his cheeks. The wind rattled the dead branches overhead. As he approached, something creaked deep inside the house, too heavy to be an animal, too slow to be coincidence. A warning. A welcome. He wasn't sure, but he kept walking. Because sometimes men walk into danger not out of bravery, but because turning around hurts more. And as he placed his foot onto the first step of the collapsing porch, he felt rather than saw Leo behind him whispering, "It looks like a castle." Michael let out a breath that trembled. Maybe he said. Maybe it is. And even though he didn't know it yet, that single step onto the porch of 1437 Hollow Ridge Drive would drag him into secrets, buried for decades, hidden rooms, missing engineers, and a machine that would rewrite history. But for now, all he knew was this: he was going inside. The front porch groaned under Michael's weight as he stepped onto it. The wood soft in places, the railings wrapped in vines like skeletal fingers reaching for something long gone. A cracked porch light swayed slightly in the breeze above him. It wasn't even plugged in. Just swinging a hollow motion in a hollow place. He knocked on the front door out of habit, even though no one had lived here in decades. No answer, of course. He reached for the handle. Before he could try the door, a white pickup pulled in behind his car. Michael turned, squinting through the early morning light. An older man climbed out, sturdy build, late 50s maybe, in a county-issued jacket that had seen a few too many winters. A name patch stitched in above the chest pocket read, "Harold Green." "You Michael Carter?" the man asked, shutting the truck door with his boot. "Yeah," Michael said, stepping off the porch. "You must be the inspector." Harold took one look at the house and let out a long, slow whistle. "Son, this ain't just a fixer-upper," he said. "It's a damn archaeological site." Michael forced a smile. "I figured it was pretty bad." "You figured wrong." This place, Harold turned to face him fully. "This place is a warning wearing wood and brick." Michael's smile faltered. He looked back at the sagging front of the house. "That's dramatic." "It's also true." "You sure you want to go through with this?" "I already signed the papers." Harold muttered something under his breath. "Let me take a look before you go inside. I'll let you know if the floors'll kill you." Michael waited near the car with Leo, who was still in the back seat, now watching a cartoon on his dad's cracked phone. "Is it haunted?" Leo asked without looking up. Michael glanced back at the house. "Maybe," he said. "But even ghosts need a place to live." Leo nodded as if that made sense. Harold returned 20 minutes later, brushing cobwebs from his shoulders and shaking his head like a man walking out of a bad dream. "Well, roof's shot. There's water damage in almost every room. Mold in at least 3 places. Floors are soft, you'll need to replace half the subflooring. Animals been nesting. Wiring's original. Plumbing might still work, but I wouldn't drink it. So, bad would be a compliment." Michael sighed. "How much are we talking?" Harold rubbed his chin. "Just to make it livable, you're looking at a minimum of 50 grand. More like 75, maybe 80 if you want it done right. That's assuming you don't find any fun surprises hiding in the walls." Michael swallowed hard. "That's more than I have." Harold looked at him. "I figured." Michael stared at the house. He didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, "I can do some of the work myself. I learn fast. I need a place for my kid. We've been living on top of each other in a room where the neighbors scream all night, and the heater barely works. I'm not trying to flip it or sell it. I just want to live." Harold's voice softened. "I get that. I really do. But this house'll eat your soul if you're not careful." Michael nodded. "Maybe. But at least it'll be mine." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Michael drove Leo to school, then went straight to the diner for his shift. While scraping burnt cheese off the grill, he kept thinking about the house. How parts of it didn't even look real, like a dream you remembered wrong. The way the light hit the windows. The curve of the staircase just beyond the front hall. The way the air inside felt like it was holding its breath. After work, he picked up Leo and went straight to the local hardware store. He bought gloves, trash bags, a respirator, and the cheapest crowbar they had. His bank account dropped below $200. He didn't tell Becca. The next morning, he dropped Leo at school and drove back out to Hollow Ridge. No one else was on the road. The house waited in the trees, silent and still. Michael parked on the shoulder, grabbed the gear from the trunk, and headed in. Inside, the smell hit first. Mold. Rot. Something dead or long unwashed. He tied the respirator over his nose and mouth and forced the front door open. It let out a groan like it was waking up from something it didn't want to remember. The front hall had once been grand. A curved staircase rose to the second floor, though the banister sagged in the middle. Wallpaper peeled in long, yellowed strips. The light coming in through the broken windows fell in fractured lines. To his left, a wide archway opened into a formal living room. He stepped inside. He spent the next hour clearing out garbage old couch cushions with mysterious stains, broken glass, shredded insulation. Something had definitely nested in here. Possibly died in here. He didn't want to look too close. Every movement stirred dust into the air. Every step tested the floor. Still beneath it all, the bones were good. The structure was old but strong in places. The fireplace had a heavy stone mantel. The windows, though shattered, had beautiful iron frames. He could picture it, if he let himself, what it could become. At the end of the second hour, he'd filled 8 trash bags and barely cleared half the room. He slumped onto a sturdy corner of the floor, pulled off his gloves, and looked around. For a second, he let the silence settle. It wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. He worked every day that week, after the diner, before the night shift. On Saturday, he brought Leo with him, kept him on the porch with coloring books and juice boxes while he continued clearing the downstairs. Becca found out by Monday. "You're working on that place?" she asked, arms crossed in his kitchen. "Yes." "You dragging Leo out there too?" "He's not inside. He stays on the porch." She exhaled hard. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "I'm not," he said. "I'm trying to give my kid a home. You don't have to give him a castle, just a roof." Michael looked at her. He called it a castle the first time he saw it. Becca didn't respond for a moment. Then quietly whispered, "Don't break yourself building something that breaks you back." Michael nodded. Too late for that. At the end of the week, Michael stood at the top of the stairs in the front hall looking down at the entryway. It was cleaner now, though not by much. A patch of floor near the wall looked like it might cave in. He'd have to deal with that soon. He turned to head upstairs, but paused. There was a narrow hallway near the back of the house he hadn't explored yet. He walked down it slowly, flashlight in hand. Doors lined each side, empty rooms, closets, and then one door at the end, slightly ajar. He pushed it open. It was a study, at least it had been. Bookshelves lined the walls, though most were empty or broken. A desk sat under the window, warped from years of sun and neglect. And on the far wall, a panel. It looked like a built-in shelf, but the grain of the wood didn't quite match the others. Michael stepped closer, ran his hand along the edge. It clicked. A small puff of dust. The shelf shifted, and behind it, darkness. A staircase leading down. His heart thudded in his chest. He didn't know what was down there, but he was going to find out. The flashlight beam cut through the dust as Michael stepped down the hidden staircase, each footfall echoing against cold stone. The air grew cooler with every step. Not musty like the rest of the house cleaner somehow. Undisturbed. He reached the bottom and found himself in a narrow corridor lined with unfinished concrete. The walls had no markings, no paint, no signs that this part of the house was ever meant to be seen. It was as if someone had built it to be forgotten. At the end of the hall, a heavy steel door stood half open. Michael hesitated, then pushed it fully open. The flashlight flickered, and there it was. A room. Large, cold, lined with shelves and workbenches. It looked like a lab or some kind of workshop, oscilloscopes, voltmeters, boxes of wires, glass containers filled with unidentifiable metal pieces. In the center of the room stood something covered in a thick canvas tarp. Big, about 4 feet tall and almost as wide, Michael moved slowly, circling it, the light from his flashlight sliding across bolts, cables, and copper tubing that ran from the floor into the base of the covered machine. He didn't pull the tarp. Not yet. Instead, his eye caught a stack of notebooks on the back table. Dozens of them. Weathered. Tagged with post-it notes and sticky tabs curling at the corners. Beside them, a corkboard maps, drawings, equations, newspaper clippings. The clippings were decades old. The oldest was dated 1986. Michael ran a finger over the top of one notebook, then picked it up. The cover was leather, black, cracked. It had initials on the front, VC. He flipped it open. The handwriting was tight, almost mechanical. Perfect lines, detailed sketches of electrical systems, energy conversions, field diagrams. The first page read, Project Log, Day 1. If you're reading this, then you found the first marker. Good, you're paying attention. You'll need that. Michael blinked, then read it again. His hands started to tremble. He turned the page. More notes. More sketches. Then a line that punched right through the silence of the room. A man disappeared in this house and he never came back out. Michael exhaled, stunned. He looked around the room again, this time seeing it not just as a forgotten lab, but as a story one left behind, half-told, waiting. He read on. The journal was written by someone named Victor Chun. The entries detailed an obsession with clean, self-sustaining energy. There were rants against the scientific establishment, frustrations with investors who pulled out mentions of experiments that had nearly worked, but not quite. And then, paranoia. March 12, 1991. They know, not sure who. Phone line tapped, could be nothing, could be everything. Must start hiding the work. March 15, 1991. They're coming. Can't let it be taken. Can't let it die. I'll scatter the parts, the journals, the keys. Let the house keep them safe until the right person finds them. Someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Start in the library. Look for the books that don't belong. Michael lowered the notebook. The silence in the room felt louder now. He turned back to the object under the tarp. Whatever it was, it had been important enough for someone to risk everything and then vanish. He should leave. Call someone. Tell Eli. Tell Becca. But instead, he walked over to the canvas, gripped the edge, and pulled. Dust exploded upward, catching in the flashlight beam like ash. Underneath was a machine, roughly cylindrical, copper coils wrapped around a central core. Crystal-like structures embedded into its framework shimmered in the light. Wires snaked into a panel with analog dials and toggle switches. It looked like a generator, but also like art. Purposeful, built with care and vision. A strange, silent presence. Michael circled it again. The labels on the switches were handwritten. The dials were calibrated down to decimals. He had no idea what it did. But he knew what it meant. Victor Chun hadn't just vanished, he'd left something behind. Something impossible. And Michael had found it. By the time Michael climbed the stairs again, it was nearly dark outside. The house creaked around him as he stepped into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, mind spinning. He stayed there a long time, barely noticing the cold, barely moving at all. That night in his cramped apartment, he didn't sleep. He waited until Leo was tucked in, then opened the journal again at the kitchen table. The diagrams meant nothing to him. Not yet. But he couldn't stop reading. Victor's notes were brilliant and unhinged, full of equations and raw determination. References to energy fields, resonance cycles, quantum phase catalysts, things Michael had only heard in movies. But what grabbed him was the intent. This wasn't a madman tinkering in a basement. Victor had been on the edge of a breakthrough, and someone had tried to shut him down. Someone had succeeded. The next morning, Michael dropped Leo off and went straight to the diner but couldn't focus. The sizzle of bacon and clink of plates sounded far away. After his shift, he called Eli. "You got a minute?" Michael asked. "I need to show you something." Eli's eyes lit up the moment he stepped into the hidden basement. "Holy hell," he breathed. "This is... I don't know," Michael said. A generator, a prototype. Definitely not your average DIY project, Eli muttered, walking around the machine like it might wake up and bite him. This wiring is weird, old, but specific. Someone knew what they were doing. Michael handed him the journal. Eli read in silence for a long time. Victor Chun, he finally said. I've heard of him. Michael blinked. What, My dad used to talk about him. Said he was a genius, total recluse, though. Went off the radar in the early 90s. People thought he either went nuts or got disappeared. Michael crossed his arms. You believe he made this? Eli looked at the machine again, eyes wide with wonder. If half this stuff in here is real, it's not just a generator. It's clean energy, self-powered, no fuel, just power. Michael looked at the machine, then the room, then the journal, and the words echoed again. A man disappeared in this house and he never came back out. Back upstairs, Michael sat on the floor of the study thinking. Victor's note had said, start in the library. Look for the books that don't belong. Michael hadn't seen a library in the house, but maybe he hadn't known what to look for. He stood, went room to room, until he opened what he thought had been a storage room, empty shelves, dust-covered floor. He looked closer. One side of the shelves didn't match the others. Newer wood, slightly off alignment. He stepped forward, ran his hand along the edge. A click, a whir, and a section of shelving slowly swung open. Behind it, a dark stairwell descended into another level of the house. Michael didn't say anything. He just reached for his flashlight again. The second set of stairs descended more steeply than the first narrow concrete steps, worn smooth from use but still strangely clean, like they'd been shielded from the decay swallowing the rest of the mansion. Michael's flashlight beam jittered across the walls as he tried to steady his breathing. The deeper he went, the more it felt like the house wasn't just hiding a secret, it was leading him somewhere. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into another chamber, this one much larger than the first basement he had found. The space stretched wide with tables arranged in a circular pattern, each covered in tools, instruments, papers, and stacks of unlabeled boxes. It felt nothing like the dusty shell above. This room had been lived in, used, cared for. Victor didn't just work down here, Michael whispered. He lived down here. Eli, walking carefully behind him, let out a low whistle. This is insane. You don't stumble into secrets like this unless someone wanted them found. Michael didn't answer, but the words hit him with more weight than he expected. Because he felt it too, this was deliberate. Every hidden latch, every misplaced shelf, every journal stashed behind a wallboard. It all felt less like a man hiding his work and more like a man constructing a path toward discovery. Their flashlights washed over the nearest table cluttered with engineering tools frozen in time. Copper wire spools, a soldering iron, jars filled with bolts and insulated screws, a chalkboard to the left covered in equations neither of them recognized, symbols and loops and references to field harmonics and resonance patterns. Michael couldn't begin to parse. This is a real lab, Eli muttered, stepping forward, awe pulling him like gravity. Holy hell, he had everything down here. Michael walked toward the corkboard fastened to the wall. Sheets of graph paper were pinned in overlapping layers, scribbles in ink and pencil forming a lattice of unfinished thoughts. The photos taped at the corners caught his attention first. The same man appeared in each middle-aged wiry with intense eyes behind thick glasses. Victor Chun. One picture showed him standing beside an early version of the machine upstairs, smaller, rougher, but unmistakably the same core idea. Another showed him at the mansion's front steps, smiling faintly at the camera. But not a single image showed another person. Michael swallowed. He was alone. People like him usually are, Eli said without looking up. Michael pulled a faded blueprint from the corkboard, unfolding it carefully. The paper was brittle, but intact, covered in meticulous sketches of coils, conductive plates, and a central column labeled Q Cascade Core. "This looks like the thing upstairs," Michael said. Eli leaned over his shoulder. "Yeah, but this is version 3. The one upstairs must be version 5 or 6. Whatever he was trying to build, he was refining it. And what exactly is it?" Eli opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at the blueprint one more time before answering. "I think it's a clean energy generator. A perpetual one. Self-sustaining once activated. That's what the journals hinted at, right?" Michael thought of the passage he'd read until dawn. The warnings, the desperation, and the hope. "Victor said he hid the parts," Michael murmured. "He broke the machine down before he disappeared." "Yeah," Eli said softly. "And if he did, they're somewhere in this house." Michael looked around the lab again, feeling suddenly watched. Not by something sinister, by something expectant. Like the house was holding its breath, waiting for him to take the next step. He moved to the center of the room and finally faced the large object resting beneath the canvas tarp. His fingers brushed the rough fabric. Dust clung to his gloves. "You ready?" he asked. "No," Eli replied. "Do it anyway." Michael pulled. The tarp fell away like shedding skin. The machine gleamed under the flashlight beam, copper coils glowing faintly, crystalline components embedded in the metal frame like captured stars. Wires curled from the base into an analog control panel marked with handwritten labels Field Input Cascade. Eli stepped back as if holy ground had just been exposed. "This isn't scrap," he whispered. "This is genius. Hand-built, custom components. Some of this stuff I don't even have names for." Michael's pulse quickened. Could it work? Eli hesitated. "I don't know, but if it can, it's something big." The room hummed faintly with their breathing. Michael's eyes drifted to a locked metal cabinet near the far wall. "What about that?" They pried it open using one of the crowbars left behind. Inside lay several small parts wrapped in cloth, more coils, plates, and a circuit board etched with complex pathways. A wrapped journal sat atop everything. Michael lifted it out slowly, hands tingling. Another set of instructions, another riddle. Eli held the flashlight steady while Michael opened to the first page. Day 198. If you're here, you found the lab. Good. But the machine above isn't whole. I couldn't let it be. Not when they were watching. Not when they were closing in. More sketches. More codes. Then a simple note. The next piece is where the house remembers what it once was. Start where it greets the morning. Michael exhaled. The sunrise room. Eli nodded. The master bedroom. "Why hide everything?" Michael said softly. "Why not just finish the machine? Why break it apart?" Eli shrugged. Maybe he ran out of time. Maybe someone came for him. The weight of those words settled deeply. The machine, the journals, the hidden pathways, they were never meant to stay in the dark forever. Michael closed the journal carefully. "We need to find the rest," he said. Eli nodded. "And you're going to need help. Real help. This isn't some backyard science project. This is something people spend their lives studying. You mean professionals, I mean geniuses, and maybe someone like Victor. Michael looked around the room again at the empty coffee mugs, the chalkboard filled with tangled thought, the carefully arranged tools. I think Victor knew he wasn't going to finish this, he said quietly. I think he wanted someone else to. Maybe Eli replied. Or maybe he wanted someone who needed it. Michael closed his eyes briefly. He needed it. He needed something, anything, to pull him out of the grind, to make life feel possible again, to build a future Leo could believe in. Eli placed a hand on the machine. We should get some pictures. Maybe I can send them to a professor I know. Michael nodded. Not too many. Not the whole thing. Just enough to ask what we're looking at. Eli grinned. You paranoid now? After what Victor wrote a little, you're starting to sound like him. Michael didn't disagree. As they prepared to leave the lab, his flashlight swept once more across the chalkboard. Scrawled near the top was a short line of text, underlined twice: the house keeps what matters, until it doesn't. It felt like a warning, or a countdown. They climbed the stairs in silence. Before they reached the top, Michael paused. Eli. Yeah, if this machine actually works, if this is real, it changes everything. Eli finished. Michael nodded. Let's go find the next piece. They stepped into the hallway, dust swirling in the beam of the flashlight shadows, bending in the dim light. The house seemed to breathe around them. Michael sat on the floor of the master bedroom, the morning sun slanting through the dusty bay window and lighting up the wall across from him. He held the second journal in his hands, flipping back to the page where Victor's message ended with that maddening, intriguing line, "Start where it greets the morning." He turned slowly, eyeing the space. The room still smelled faintly of mildew and old wood, but after a week of scrubbing, patching, and tearing up rotted flooring, it had begun to resemble something human again, something hopeful. The sunbeam hit a spot near the corner, sharp, bright, and oddly focused. Michael got to his feet and walked to it, tapping the wall, listening. Hollow. He grabbed a utility knife and began cutting into the plaster. The blade carved a small square, and with a bit of pressure, the panel popped off. Behind it was a small metal box. His heart stuttered. It never got old, this feeling of cracking open the past, like opening a time-locked vault meant only for him. He pulled the box out and sat cross-legged on the floor. Inside, another journal thinner than the others, and a component the size of a deck of cards protected in foam. A circuit board, but unlike anything he'd ever seen, etched with delicate, almost artistic lines and fitted with crystal-like elements fused to its surface. He flipped to the first page of the journal. You made it. Good. That part was easy. The next won't be. You'll need to listen. This house speaks, but only when it hears laughter. He blinked. Laughter. Below that cryptic message, there was a sketch of the house floor plan, a room on the second floor, circled. No label, just a line drawn from it with a note where the echoes are loudest. Michael felt a smile tug at the edge of his mouth. A scavenger hunt set in motion decades ago by a man who had been labeled a mad genius. He closed the box and picked up the component gently. For a moment, the morning light caught the edge of the crystal and refracted into colors across his hand. He stared at it for a long beat. Victor had hidden his life's work in this house piece by piece, trusting a stranger would come and be just desperate or just curious enough to find it. And somehow, that stranger had turned out to be him. That night, after Leo finished dinner and curled up on the couch with a comic book, Michael pulled up his old laptop. He typed in Victor Chun's name and hit enter. Thousands of results. Most were generic old patents company records, rumors on forums. But one post on a tech conspiracy subreddit caught his eye. Victor Chun, the engineer who tried to build infinity. He clicked. The post detailed rumors that Victor Chun had been on the verge of developing a self-sustaining energy system, a device capable of generating clean power indefinitely. It described how he'd worked for several major defense contractors before abruptly resigning in the late 80s. The most unsettling part, the author claimed, Victor vanished in 1991 under unusual circumstances, just after filing a final energy-related patent, one that was never approved or published. Theories ranged from corporate sabotage to government interference, or that he'd gone mad and destroyed his own work. Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. If they knew what I was building, they'd never let it see the light of day. The line from the first journal came back to him hard. He closed the laptop and looked over at Leo, now fast asleep with the comic sliding from his lap to the floor. Michael knew now this wasn't just about solving a puzzle or building something impressive. It was about finishing something that had been buried, hidden, maybe even hunted. The next morning, Michael brought Leo to the house. He didn't tell him about the journals or the machine. Instead, he turned it into a game. "There's treasure in this house," he said, kneeling beside him on the porch. "Someone left clues. Think you can help me find them?" Leo's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. "A real treasure. A real one." Michael nodded. "But we have to listen. The house only talks to people who laugh." It was a ridiculous thing to say. But it was also exactly the kind of logic a child could accept without question. They started upstairs, checking each room. Michael watched Leo as he ran, yelled, giggled. In one room, the sound bounced back, strangely amplified, echoed longer than seemed possible. Michael stopped in the doorway. The room was small, with faded wallpaper and a broken toy chest in the corner. A playroom. This had to be it. "Let's check the closet," he said, heart thudding. Leo pushed the door open and started digging through old boards and splinters of long-forgotten furniture. Then suddenly he paused. "Dad, this one's loose." Michael crouched beside him. One wooden board at the back of the closet had been wedged in awkwardly. He pulled it free and found a hollow compartment behind it. Another box. He opened it carefully. Another component, larger this time, shaped like a junction core with magnetic connectors, and another journal. Leo leaned closer. "Did we find treasure?" Michael grinned. "We really did." That night he opened the journal in the quiet of their apartment, with Leo fast asleep and the city whispering through the windows. This entry was different, less technical, more personal. Victor talked about being watched, about strange cars parked outside, about letters that stopped arriving, phone calls that cut off mid-sentence, but also about hope. "They don't believe in it," Victor wrote, "but someone will. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow. But someday, someone like me, someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove, will pick up where I left off." Michael closed the book and pressed his hand against the cover. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a genius. He was a guy working 2 jobs to keep his kid in clean clothes and peanut butter. But maybe that was enough. The next morning, Michael called Eli. "I found another piece," he said. "You need to see it." They met at the house and Eli examined the new component with careful hands. He whistled low. "This thing's custom built. Probably connects the cascade to the control unit. The energy transfer layout is tight, brilliant really." Michael nodded. "There's more." Eli glanced up. "How many more?" Victor didn't say. just that the next is where the house sees but doesn't show. Something about needing light to reveal it. Eli's brow furrowed. A mirror. Maybe. Michael walked to the entryway and looked at the cracked mirror hanging near the stairs. The light from the window hit it sideways. He tilted the mirror slightly. And there at the edge something shimmered. A hairline crack that wasn't a crack at all. A seam. He reached for it. Paused. And then smiled. Next clue, he said. We're getting close. Eli looked from Michael to the mirror, then to the machine waiting in the basement. You know what happens if it actually works right, he said. Michael nodded. Yeah. It changes everything. The mirror didn't give easily. Michael pressed along the edge fingers, tracing the faint seam where silver met drywall. It wasn't glued. It wasn't screwed in. It was set like a lid on a box waiting to be opened. Eli stood just behind him, flashlight angled up. You sure about this? Michael gave a small nod. Victor's journal said, the house sees but doesn't show until you let the light in. This is it. It has to be. He grabbed a flathead screwdriver from the tool belt around his waist and wedged it under the corner of the mirror. A small pop. Then another. The glass shifted forward just a few inches, but enough to reveal a shallow cavity behind it. Both men leaned closer. Inside the hidden space was a velvet-lined recess. At its center sat an ornate rectangular piece of metal no larger than a smartphone. Brass, maybe. Polished with a strange symbol etched on its face, a spiral inside a triangle. Around it were 3 empty slots like this piece belonged to a larger hole. Next to it lay a small envelope yellowed with age. Michael pulled the metal piece out gently, then opened the envelope. A folded page inside read, Where laughter hides but never dies. She left it behind. Beneath the message was a drawing, a girl's bedroom from the looks of it. Posters on the wall, a small canopy bed, a teddy bear on a shelf. Michael looked up at Eli. A daughter. Victor had a kid, Michael shrugged. Looks like it. Eli gestured to the component. That thing looks like a key. Literally. Michael turned it over in his hand. 3 missing pieces. 1 machine. We're putting together something that was meant to stay buried. Eli didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. Michael stood at the base of the stairs later that afternoon, watching Leo run through the halls of Hollow Ridge like the house belonged to him. He laughed real laughter, the kind that cracked open silence. It echoed off the old walls and bounced down corridors like a memory come to life. You hear that? Michael asked. Becca, standing beside him with her arms crossed, nodded slowly. Yeah. Creepy. In a sweet way. He glanced sideways. Thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, she said deadpan. I came to make sure you weren't dragging my kid into some haunted Frankenstein project without backup. He smirked. You think it's haunted? She raised an eyebrow. A man disappears, the house eats itself, and suddenly you're playing scavenger hunt with ghost blueprints. Haunted feels generous. Michael started to laugh, but it died quickly. I think Victor had a daughter, he said. Becca's expression shifted. And she lived here, I don't know. But he left clues in what looks like a little girl's bedroom. We're going to check it out. Becca exhaled. Then let's go see where laughter hides. The room was upstairs, toward the back of the house, tucked away quiet. The walls were still painted faint pink beneath peeling floral wallpaper. A cracked rocking horse sat in the corner. The bed frame, small and white, leaned against the far wall with one leg broken. But something about the room felt lighter. Leo wandered in first. Was this hers? Maybe Michael said, stepping in slowly. Can you look around? Carefully. Leo nodded and got to work. Becca crossed to the bookshelf. It was mostly empty, but one book sat upside down near the bottom. She pulled it free and handed it to Michael. He opened it. Pages had been cut out from the center, forming a crude compartment. Inside, a folded sheet of paper and a small circular copper piece may be part of the strange key from earlier. He clicked it into one of the empty slots. It fit. Becca peered over his shoulder. You really think Victor planned all this? I don't think he trusted anyone else to. Michael unfolded the paper. A short note. My daughter loved music. She believed it could open anything, even locked hearts. Below the message was a drawing of a music box. Leo, still exploring, called out, Dad, this thing makes noise. Michael turned. His son stood beside a small vanity desk with a broken drawer. When Michael knelt and jiggled the back panel, he felt it shift. A compartment popped open. Inside, a wind-up music box shaped like a star. It didn't look special, tin casing, chipped paint. Michael twisted the key and let it play. A delicate lullaby rang out. Faint but clear. Becca whispered, That's kind of beautiful. As the last note faded, something clicked. Literally. A soft metallic sound from behind the wall. Michael walked to the far corner where the baseboard didn't quite line up. He pried it free and found another hollow. Inside, a cloth-wrapped object heavier than the others. The third component. They unwrapped it carefully. A cylinder glass covered filled with small, floating filaments. Eli would later call it some kind of flux containment core. Michael called it the second piece of the future. It snapped into the second slot of the brass key like it had been waiting all this time. 2 of 3. They were close. That evening, after dropping Leo off at Becca's place, Michael returned to Hollow Ridge alone. He stood in the lab staring at the half-assembled machine. His hands trembled slightly as he inserted the brass key into a matching port on the side of the device. It didn't activate, but the screen above it, dead for weeks, flickered. Just for a second. But enough. Something inside the system had acknowledged its missing piece. Michael leaned against the table, staring down at Victor's notes. So many of them were scattered fragments, disconnected thoughts. But the through line was always clear. This machine could change everything, not just for the world, for Michael, for Leo. A home powered by something permanent. Security that didn't run out when rent was due. Purpose. Even if no one else believed in it. Even if it scared him. Especially because it scared him. He opened one of Victor's later journals. This one was darker. Paranoid. The writing messy and rushed. They know I've made progress. They want it. They'll wait until I finish, then they'll take it. I won't give them that chance. Michael felt his gut twist. He was being watched. Victor had known it. And maybe now so was he. He looked toward the window and stepped closer. Across the street, parked half in shadow under a dying oak tree, was a dark sedan. Engine off, windows tinted. It hadn't been there earlier. Michael's breath caught. He watched it for a long minute. Then the engine started, and the car drove away slowly, too slowly. Victor's final line from the last journal flickered through his mind. Finish it. Before they do. The dark sedan hadn't returned, but its absence felt louder than its presence. Michael stared through the cracked living room window the next morning, sipping lukewarm coffee, every creak in the house now suspicious. The morning light cut across the floor, catching dust in the air like it was trying to reveal something, but all he saw was the empty street and the echo of a question he couldn't shake. Who else knows he didn't tell Eli about the car? Not yet. He needed to be sure. And besides, there was something more urgent. The final piece. The machine was nearly complete. The brass key, now holding 2 of 3 components, clicked into the panel like it had always belonged there. But one final piece remained. Victor had called it the core lock. Michael opened Journal 6 again, flipping to a bookmarked page. Victor's handwriting was more jagged here, his thoughts fraying. The last piece is the most dangerous. I didn't hide it. I sealed it. Only light that doesn't belong will reveal it. Michael whispered it aloud. Light that doesn't belong. He stared at the sentence. It looped in his mind like a riddle. What kind of light didn't belong? Sunlight. No, that belonged. The house was built around it. He stood slowly looking around the room. His gaze fell to the hallway closet where he'd stored the old camping gear he used during the early cleanup. Flashlights, lanterns, tools, and something else. Michael reached into the duffel bag and pulled out a blacklight. He held it in his palm, considering. If Victor meant this kind of light artificial ultraviolet, it might show something the rest of the house couldn't. He snapped it on. The room glowed in soft purples and hidden stains. He swept it across the walls, over the floors, checking every edge of the lab. Nothing. Then he moved upstairs. At the end of the hall, where the attic entrance was hidden behind a slatted panel, the light caught something. Writing. Invisible in the daylight. Clear in violet. I remember everything. Michael froze. The words were burned into the panel in long, deliberate strokes. He pulled down the attic ladder and climbed carefully. The air was thick and hot. Old insulation and decaying wood made it nearly unbreathable. But something else was here. He swept the blacklight across the far wall and saw it. More writing. This time you're not the first to look for answers, but you might be the last to find them. Michael followed the markings to the corner where a small chest sat tucked beneath a rotted beam. Not locked. Just waiting. He opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in layers of silk and foam, was the final piece, a cube made of brushed aluminum, with strange glyphs etched into every face. It pulsed faintly, even in the dark, reacting to the black light in Michael's hand. It looked like it was breathing. He lifted it, heart pounding, and tucked it carefully into his satchel. As he turned to climb down, he spotted something else, a photo pinned to a wooden beam with a rusted nail. Victor. Older than in the other pictures. Eyes tired, beard, longer hair unkempt. He was holding a child, maybe 7 years old, a girl with a gap-toothed grin and wild curly hair. Scrawled across the photo in faded ink. She'll finish it if I can't. Michael stared at it for a long time, his throat tight. He wasn't just rebuilding a machine. He was carrying out someone's final wish. Back in the lab, Michael inserted the cube into the final slot on the brass key. The machine let out a low hum, a real sound this time not imagined. Panels lit up. A gauge activated its needle, hovering slightly above 0. Michael took a step back, eyes wide. It's alive, Eli whispered from behind him. Michael hadn't heard him come in. Where have you been? Michael asked. Eli looked pale, sweaty, shaken. I got a visitor, he said. Some guy in a suit. Said he was from a private research group. Didn't give a name. Just started asking about Hollow Ridge. And about you. Michael stiffened. What did you tell him? Nothing. I played dumb. But he knew things. Mentioned Victor. Mentioned patents. Even knew about the journals. Michael rubbed his jaw. They're watching now. They've been watching, Eli said. I think they were just waiting to see how far you'd get. Michael nodded slowly. Then they know I'm close. Eli stepped closer to the machine. Closer than anyone's ever been. They both looked down at it. The machine thrummed softly, almost like a heartbeat. A screen flickered on green text over black. Initialization ready, field stabilizer required before activation. Eli frowned. Stabilizer. Michael opened Victor's final journal again, flipping to the last entry. There, scrawled in the margins, "You cannot birth a star in a broken room. Stabilize the field or it'll consume itself." He showed it to Eli. "What does it mean?" Eli paced. "If I had to guess, the room it needs to be insulated, grounded. If this thing produces energy the way he claimed, it's going to generate massive field distortion. Without shielding, it could collapse. Collapse what? The machine. The room, us." Michael stared at the floor. "So we build a cage." Eli nodded. "Copper mesh, rubberized walls. I can get supplies. But it'll take time." "How much a week?" "Maybe less if we push hard." Michael looked back at the machine. It had taken them this long. He could wait one more week, but someone else might not. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He sat in the study with the journals scattered around him, flipping through them again and again. The patterns started to make sense. Victor hadn't just hidden parts. He'd created tests, each step designed to challenge thought, intuition, heart. And someone else, Victor's daughter, was meant to continue that legacy. But she never did. Why, where was she now? As dawn broke, Michael stood at the front window, and there it was again. The sedan. This time parked closer, engine running. Michael opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The driver didn't move. Didn't even blink. Michael lifted his phone and snapped a photo. The car pulled away instantly, tires crunching over gravel. Michael didn't follow. He turned and looked back at his house, and said aloud to no one, "Let them watch. I'm not building this for them." Because if this worked, if he finished it, everything would change. The copper mesh snapped under tension, catching the light, like a spider web spun from electricity. Eli crouched near the far wall of the lab, hands working fast, sweat streaking the dust on his forehead. Michael stood nearby, bracing the frame of what would become the stabilization chamber, a crude Faraday cage built from salvaged copper wire rebar and insulation panels. They'd been at it for 18 hours straight. No breaks, no arguments. Just drive. Outside, the November wind howled against the cracked siding of Hollow Ridge. Inside, the hum of the machine pulsed louder now, as if it could sense its own rebirth. Michael tightened a bolt and stepped back. "It's holding." "Barely," Eli muttered. "This room wasn't made for miracles." Michael gave a tired half-smile. "Then we'll make it one anyway." Eli wiped his hands on his jeans, then pulled out a folded sheet of notebook paper. "I did some back-of-the-envelope math. If Victor was right, and this thing really does run a quantum cascade field, we're going to need more than just insulation. We'll need grounding, serious grounding. Otherwise..." Michael waited. Eli's voice dropped. "It won't just blow. It'll erase itself. And possibly half this street." Michael nodded slowly. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen." They didn't say it, but they both knew they were past the point of turning back. Becca arrived just after noon, pushing through the front door with a determined stride and a bag of groceries slung over one shoulder. Her boots thudded against the floor, and her voice rang sharp through the silence. Either of you eaten in the last day, or are we living entirely on caffeine and mania now? Michael appeared at the top of the basement stairs, filthy and exhausted. Somewhere between mania and survival. You brought food, I brought real food. Protein, vitamins, water. You know, things that stop humans from dying. She walked past him straight into the kitchen. Eli followed her, hands blackened with wire dust. You're a saint. I'm a mother, she shot back. Same thing, different audience. Michael leaned against the doorframe and watched her unpack. There was something grounding about her presence, like she belonged in the chaos, even if she hated every second of it. She turned to face him. How close are you, Michael? Looked toward the basement. We're almost ready, maybe 48 hours. Becca's jaw tensed. And the car still showing up. Same guy, same time. He hasn't gotten out yet. But I can feel it. He's waiting for us to light the match. Becca's eyes didn't waver. Then we better make sure we're ready for what happens after. That night the house vibrated. Not from machinery, from the tension inside it. Michael sat on the basement floor, back against the far wall, staring at the machine like it might speak to him. Eli had gone home for a few hours to sleep. Becca had taken Leo, just for the night. But Michael couldn't leave. Not now. The brass key pulsed faintly in the machine's control panel, its 3 components locked in. The gauges were still in the green. But something felt different, more alive. He pulled Victor's final journal from his backpack and flipped to a page he hadn't read aloud yet. The machine is not the end. It's the gate. What comes through depends on who opens it. Michael stared at that sentence. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. He looked up at the coil above him, copper wrapped in intricate rings, humming faintly now, like the buildup of a storm just outside perception. This wasn't just about energy. Victor had built something more, and Michael was starting to believe it. The next morning, Eli returned with a fresh stack of materials and dark circles under his eyes. Okay, he said, dropping everything on the floor. We finished the cage today. Then we test the boot sequence. If the readings hold stable, we initiate the power loop. Michael nodded, already tightening bolts. And if they don't, then we shut it down and never speak of this again. Michael grinned. You'd really let it go, Eli hesitated. No. But we'd be alive to regret it. They worked in silence for hours, measuring resistance, bolting down shielding wrapping, every exposed edge in double insulation. Becca returned by mid-afternoon this time, bringing Leo with her. The boy ran down the hallway, backpack bouncing behind him. Dad, he shouted. I drew the machine. Michael looked up, surprised. Leo opened his sketchbook and showed a surprisingly accurate drawing of the device, coils, switches, even the control panel. Becca shrugged. He remembers everything, like someone else I know. Michael looked at the picture for a long moment. We're almost ready, buddy. Can I be here when it turns on, Beck? Jumped in. Absolutely not. Michael hesitated. We'll see. No, she said again, firmer now. You're already risking your own life. You don't get to gamble his too. Michael didn't argue. She was right. He knew she was right. But it still tore something in him. Because he wanted Leo to see what it looked like when you built something that mattered. When you finished what someone else only dreamed of. By midnight, the stabilization chamber was complete. The lab was now a cage, one lined with copper, sealed at the seams, and grounded to the steel supports driven deep beneath the foundation. Every connection was triple-checked. Every failsafe tested. Eli stood at the control panel, staring at the flickering readout. "Ready to initialize field loop," he said. Michael stood beside him, hand resting on the activation switch. "One last chance to back out," Eli offered. Michael took a deep breath and said the words Victor had once written in a note now burned into his memory. "You can't erase what's already been lit." He flipped the switch. The machine pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady hum. The gauges moved. The loop initiated. The coil above them glowed softly, no flickers, no instability. It was holding. It was working. Eli whispered, "We did it." But Michael didn't speak. He was staring at the screen, because it had changed. New text appeared. "Sequence accepted. Awaiting authorization. Welcome, Aurora." Michael's throat went dry. "Aurora," he said. The girl, Eli said quietly. "Victor's daughter." Michael stepped back from the console, heart pounding. She was supposed to activate it. "Not me." Eli frowned. "Then why did it accept you?" Michael didn't answer. Because he already knew. A low tone rang out through the chamber, a steady pulse like a breath held in stasis. The light inside the machine dimmed, then sharpened. The words on the monitor blinked again. "Welcome, Aurora." Michael stared at it like it had spoken aloud. His heart thudded against his ribs. Eli leaned forward. "Why would it say that now we've activated parts of it before? This never happened." Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew the answer. This machine wasn't just a system of wires and coils. It was something more, something watching, and now, something remembering. A second line of text appeared. "Authorization code required to initiate core." Eli turned to Michael. "Aurora's the key. Not the brass piece, not the components. Her. She was meant to finish it." Michael swallowed. Then maybe it wasn't built for anyone else. Except now it's listening to you. Eli stepped back. "Why, what's the connection?" Michael's mind raced. The journals, the photo in the attic, the whisper of a life left behind. "She never finished it," Michael said. "Victor left everything here waiting. And maybe, just maybe, this thing doesn't care who finishes it. Just that it's someone with the right fingerprint. Not literal, emotional, intentional." Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "That's not science, man. That's faith." Michael shook his head. "It's design. It's how Victor thought." Before Eli could respond, the screen changed again. Input verification sequence. While N. Michael moved before he could second-guess himself. He pressed Y. The machine hissed air being pulled through the stabilizer vents. Lights pulsed along the top of the coil. The lab floor vibrated slightly, like the ground itself was adjusting to the shift. On the monitor, blocks of code scrolled by. Then a voice came through. Clear, soft, female. "Hello, Michael." Both men froze. Michael stepped closer to the screen. "What the hell?" Eli whispered. "Did it just say your name?" The voice continued. "You've made it farther than anyone else. Farther than even he thought possible." Michael's throat was dry. "Who are you?" "I'm what remains. A copy, an echo, a shadow of a memory. I am Aurora." Eli stumbled back. She uploaded something. Her consciousness, that's not possible. Michael's eyes stayed locked on the screen. Victor didn't just build a machine. He built a message. A person. Aurora's voice softened. He tried to save me. But it was too late. This is all he could do. Keep me here. A voice. A mind. A guide. Michael reached out and steadied himself on the panel. What are you guiding me toward? There was a pause. Then completion. Purpose. Truth. Eli looked between Michael and the machine. Okay, let's say this is real. She's real. Then what now? What does she want? The screen changed again. A diagram of the house appeared marked in glowing white. Below it, a message. Energy grid ready. Transfer pending. Are you prepared to activate full cascade? Michael stared at it. This was the moment. They had built the cage. They had found the pieces. They had solved Victor's riddles. And now, standing at the edge of everything, the house was asking one question. Are you ready to change the world? He looked at Eli. We activate. Just enough to confirm it works. Then we shut it down, document everything, and start figuring out what the hell to do next. Eli nodded reluctantly. And if something goes wrong, you kill the power and run. Michael turned to the screen. Begin cascade sequence. Aurora's voice responded soft but firm. Initializing. Brace for surge. The lights in the lab dimmed. The machine whined a low, high-frequency pitch that seemed to live in the walls. Copper coils began to glow from within, like veins filling with liquid light. The brass key rotated once inside its slot. The stabilizer chamber hummed, resisting the pressure building inside. And then silence, a moment of perfect stillness, followed by a brilliant pulse, not a flash, a feeling, like air being replaced by something deeper, like standing inside a living, breathing presence. Eli gasped. Jesus, do you feel that? It's like gravity shifted. Michael finished gripping the rail. The monitor began printing data rapidly. Graphs, readouts, energy levels, sustainable, stable, self-contained. Michael's eyes widened. It's working. Eli laughed, stunned. It's really working. But then Aurora spoke again. Warning, external scan detected. Network breach attempt in progress. Michael's heart dropped. What? The screen turned red. Unauthorized signal detected. Location 112 feet northwest. Device class interceptor. Eli's face drained of color. They're trying to access it remotely. Michael spun, bolting up the stairs. He threw open the front door. The sedan was parked just beyond the tree line, closer than ever. This time the driver was out. A man in his 40s, black suit, earpiece, staring straight at the house. Michael shouted, "Back off!" The man didn't flinch. Michael stepped off the porch. The man lifted a small device from his pocket. It glowed faintly red pulses matching the rhythm of the machine below. Michael's voice cracked with fury. "You're trying to steal it." The man said nothing. Then he spoke into his earpiece, turned slowly, and walked back to the car. Michael watched the sedan pull away for the last time. But he knew. They'd be back. And next time they wouldn't knock. He stood there for a long moment, wind cutting through his jacket, until Becca appeared beside him. "How bad is it?" she asked. Michael exhaled. "They're close." closer than ever. She didn't ask who they were. She'd already guessed. He turned to her. We have a choice. Shut it all down, or finish it before they take it. Becca's eyes burned with certainty. Then you better finish it. The floorboards shook under Michael's boots, not from footsteps, but from something deeper. A vibration. A tremor that rolled through the bones of the house like a living heartbeat. Below in the lab, the machine hummed with unnatural calm. On the surface, everything looked fine. Lights steady, readouts stable, the power loop fully contained. But Michael knew better. He felt it. Something was shifting. Are you sure it's not overheating? Eli asked from the stairs, glancing nervously at the floor like it might split open. Michael stood over the control panel, hands clenched. Temperature is stable. Field readings are normal. But he tapped a line of code on the monitor. The machine's adapting on its own. It's rerouting signals without instruction. Adapting, Eli repeated. That's not what we built it to do, no, Michael said. It's what Victor built it to do. Aurora's voice came through softly, like she'd been waiting for the right moment. It's not adapting. It's remembering. Michael turned to the speaker. What do you mean energy is memory? Memory is structure. I was born from both. Eli stepped forward, wary. You're saying the machine's pulling memories. From where you, Victor? A pause. Then Aurora said something that chilled the air. From the house. Michael blinked. What Hollow Ridge was never just a shell. It was a vault. Victor tied the machine's memory grid to the walls, to the wiring, to the rooms. Everything it touches, everything it powers, it remembers. Eli backed away slowly. That's not physics. That's... Michael filled in the word. Residual consciousness. Eli frowned. No. Nope. We are not doing ghosts now. But Michael's pulse was racing. Because it explained everything. The feelings, the dreams, the sensation that something else lived beneath the floor. Victor hadn't just buried a machine in this house. He'd buried a mind. That night, Becca stayed late. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, listening to Michael explain what Aurora had said. You're telling me the house is alive, she said flatly. Not alive, Michael corrected. Aware. Becca shook her head. I came here to help you build something. Fix something. Not... She gestured toward the floor. Wake up a memory hive. Michael leaned forward, his voice low. Do you remember the first day you walked in here, that feeling like something was watching? Yeah, she said. I just thought it was the mold. It wasn't. He held her gaze. Victor tied this machine into every wire, every beam. The system has bled into the foundation. It doesn't just make energy, it feels it. Becca's voice softened. You think this place is remembering him? I think it's remembering everything. Suddenly, Leo screamed from the hallway. Michael and Becca bolted from the kitchen. They found Leo standing at the top of the stairs, trembling, pointing toward the far wall. There was a girl, he said, eyes wide. She was standing there. She looked at me, and then she was gone. Michael rushed forward. What did she look like? She was older than me. Curly hair. She was crying. Becca pulled Leo into her arms. It's okay. It's okay, baby. But Michael's stomach turned. He already knew Aurora. Not just a voice, not just a file. A memory. Leaking out of the machine, out of the walls, forming shadows that weren't supposed to exist. Later in the lab, Michael stood alone. "Aurora," he said. "I'm here," the voice answered. "Did Leo see you?" A pause. Then he saw a projection. Not of me, of who I was. Michael clenched his fists. "This isn't part of the plan. You were supposed to be a guide, not haunt the place." "Memory does not obey plans," she said. "You gave the system more power than ever before. Now it can feel again. That includes sorrow. That includes loss." Michael lowered his head. "This was never about building a new kind of energy, was it? It was always about building a new kind of memory." The words echoed. Victor hadn't just wanted to power the future. He wanted to preserve it. Even the pain. Even the people he couldn't save. Michael stared at the control panel. He thought of Leo, of the girl in the hall, of the pulse under his feet. And he said barely above a whisper, "Some things are too heavy to carry forward." Aurora responded gently, "And some things will follow whether you want them to or not." The next morning, Michael found a note taped to the front door. Typed, anonymous. "You've gone too far. Power down the unit. Final warning." Becca read it over his shoulder. So they're not even pretending anymore. Michael crumpled the paper. "They're scared." "Shouldn't we be?" she asked. Michael didn't answer, but he was. Not because of the men in suits, not because of the warnings, because of what the machine was becoming. That night, Michael stood in the attic, staring at the photo still pinned to the beam, Victor and Aurora, alive, smiling. He whispered, "Did you ever really mean for this to work?" Behind him, the air shifted, the temperature dropped, and a soft whisper, barely audible, slid into his ear. Not everything buried should be unearthed. He turned sharply. But there was no one there. Only the creaking of the rafters, and the faint rhythmic pulse of the machine below. He climbed down, his skin crawling. And yet, his mind was clearer than it had ever been. Because now he understood. Victor hadn't just been hiding something. He had been protecting it. And now Michael wasn't sure if he'd just opened the door to a new future or a trap built from the past. The voice came just before sunrise. Michael had fallen asleep in the lab chair, head tilted against the wall, a wrench still gripped loosely in one hand. The machine purred beside him, calm, constant, deceptively gentle. Then it spoke. Not through the speaker system, not through Aurora. This voice came from the air itself. "Why did you wake me?" Michael's eyes flew open. He sat up, disoriented, blinking hard. The room was unchanged, lights steady, nothing visibly wrong, but something had shifted. He felt it in the marrow of his bones. "Who's there?" he said, voice cracking from sleep. No answer. But the hum of the machine dipped for half a second, like something inside it had flinched. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Eli, out of breath, eyes wild. "You heard it too?" he asked. Michael nodded. "Yeah." "That wasn't Aurora." "No," Eli said. "That was something else." Michael rose to his feet slowly. "Then we've opened more than just a door." Eli stared at the core voice, barely above a whisper. "We woke what should never breathe." Becca arrived an hour later, face pale. Leo wasn't with her. He had a dream, she said, standing in the hallway. A bad one. He said there was a girl in the walls. And she wasn't crying this time. She was screaming. Michael closed his eyes. "It's leaking." "What is the memory layer?" the house. Everything the machines absorbed, it's not just remembering anymore. It's projecting. Eli stepped beside them. There's more. Last night I ran a scan on the coil's feedback loop, and I found something embedded in the signal. He held out a printout. Jagged lines like an EKG going haywire. Michael frowned. This doesn't look like a power readout. It's not, Eli said. It's a voice signature. Becca's arms crossed. You mean a recorded voice, I mean a live one. Silence. Michael took the paper again. From who Eli's answer chilled the room. It matches Victor's biometric range. Almost exactly. But there's an overlay, something layered on top. Something distorted. Becca leaned against the wall. You think part of him is still in there? I don't think it's just a part, Eli said. I think he's been talking this whole time. And we just didn't know how to listen. Michael turned toward the lab. Then it's time we started listening. They configured the signal converter that night, a crude, hastily assembled rig using the machine's secondary processor and a pair of rewired speakers. Michael sat beside it, notebook in hand, watching the code scroll by. At 2:17 a.m., the voice returned. Raspy, warped, not human, but not entirely not either. They wanted to use her. They wanted to control it. I sealed it away. But you static. Then more clearly, you're opening it, and they will come for it. Michael leaned forward. Victor. Is that you? The answer came slow, like pushing through molasses. Not all of me. The rest stayed behind. In her, in the house in the dark, Eli whispered, God. He tied himself to it, to Aurora. He used the machine as a vault for consciousness. Becca's voice trembled. But if Victor's inside, who's the girl? Michael didn't respond, because he was already thinking the same thing. Aurora wasn't just a copy. She was a vessel. And whatever was waking up inside the house wasn't just memory. It was legacy. Twisted. Unfiltered. Hungry. The voice spoke again. They're coming. The ones who waited. They'll take her. They'll take all of it. You have to finish what I started. Seal the gate. Eli leaned in. How? But there was no answer. Just silence. And then a sound none of them could place, a low, rattling breath that seemed to echo from every wall in the room. The next morning, the power grid around Hollow Ridge flickered. Traffic lights blinked out across 2 intersections. Phone signals dropped. And in the basement, the machine pulsed stronger than ever, feeding off the surrounding energy, expanding its reach. Michael stood in the backyard watching the sky shift shades subtly. The clouds didn't move right. The wind pushed against him even though the trees didn't sway. Reality itself felt off-axis. Becca stepped outside beside him. You feel that? He nodded. Like the world's holding its breath. I think it's already exhaled. He looked at her. We have to shut it down. She didn't argue. But Leo's voice came from the porch, quiet, afraid. Do we have to kill her? Michael turned. What? Leo hugged himself. The girl. She's not bad. She's just scared. Michael knelt beside him. You've seen her again. Leo nodded. She asked me to help. She said, tell him not to let them take me. Becca went pale. Who is she talking about? Michael stood slowly. I think she means them, he said. The men in the suits. Whoever's been watching. Whatever group Victor was hiding from. Eli appeared in the doorway. Then we need to finish this before they get their hands on it. Michael looked back at the house. Everything was converging. The machine, Aurora, Victor's voice, the Watchers, the fractures in reality. It wasn't just about energy anymore. It was about ownership. Who would control memory? Who would control the mind of a house that remembered too much? He turned to Eli. Can you isolate the gate protocol? Eli nodded. I'll need a few hours, but I can do it. Michael looked at Becca. Take Leo. Go to your sister's. Stay out of town until this is over. She didn't argue this time, just nodded. Don't die in that basement. Michael gave a tired smile. I'll do my best. By nightfall, the lab was sealed. Eli stood at the terminal running a countdown. We isolate the Aurora core from the rest of the system. That should allow us to create a firewall around the consciousness, seal the feedback loop. Michael stood by the control node. What happens to the machine? It'll keep the energy loop. But the memory functions, the voice, the projections, they'll go dark. Michael hesitated, then whispered, Goodbye, Aurora. The voice came faint now, fading. Thank you for remembering. Michael's hand dropped to the kill switch. He closed his eyes and pulled it. The screen flared. The hum vanished. The air stilled. And for the first time in days, Hollow Ridge was quiet, but only for a breath. Because then the ground trembled, the lights exploded, and a new voice, lower, older, inhuman, cut through the lab. You cannot seal what has already breathed. Michael turned to Eli, horror rising. It's not over, Eli said. No, Michael whispered. It's just beginning. The sound was like nothing Michael had ever heard. Not a roar, not a scream, but something deeper and undoing, like the very air was unraveling. The lights blew out one by one. The walls pulsed, and every object in the room seemed to tremble with dread. The machine, now stripped of Aurora's stabilizing core, was no longer humming. It was groaning metal, shifting against metal energy, buckling without shape. Eli staggered backward, shielding his eyes. It's collapsing the field. It's drawing everything in. Michael gripped the rail near the main terminal. We cut the memory line. Not the power loop. What's left is trying to consume itself. Or worse, Eli said, expand. From beneath the floor, the house creaked like something was crawling through its foundation. And above them in the attic, something slammed once hard like a final heartbeat. Then came the voice again. You tried to forget, but I remember. Michael turned slowly toward the core. The screen no longer displayed text, only static. A blur. But the shape forming in that static was unmistakable. A face. Victor. Or what was left of him. Eyes hollow. Mouth moving without sound. Michael stepped forward, chest tight. You wanted this buried. The face pulsed with interference, features twitching. The voice came again, fractured. They wanted a weapon. I built a warning. Michael's eyes burned. Then why didn't you stop it? Because I loved her, and I couldn't let her go. And just like that, Michael understood. Victor hadn't sealed Aurora into the machine out of ego or ambition. He'd done it out of grief, out of love. She had died. Too young, too full of life. And in the wreckage of that pain, Victor had built a machine not just to capture energy, but to preserve her, not to remember her, but to keep her close, forever. And now without her, the machine had no center, no soul, just raw, unchecked force. Michael Eli shouted, "It's rising," and it was. The core lifted off the base, no longer bound by gravity. The coil above began to spin too fast, threads of copper snapping free like lashes. The hum had become a whine like glass about to shatter. Michael turned to Eli. "We can't contain it." "No," Eli said. "But maybe we can guide it." Michael stared at him. "Redirect the loop," Eli said. "Back into the house. Let it collapse in on itself. Use the wiring Victor tied everything into this place. The walls, the beams. It's all one system. A controlled implosion," Michael said. "A reset." Eli nodded. "But someone has to trigger it manually." Michael's chest clenched. He already knew who. He turned to the machine. "Aurora," he whispered. "Are you still there, Silence?" Then faintly, "I'm scared." Michael closed his eyes. "So am I." He stepped forward and placed both hands on the main panel. "This ends with you. Not the noise, not the power, you." The lights flared. The static face vanished. And for a brief second, the voice was no longer fractured. It was hers. Clear, steady, young. "Thank you for seeing me." Michael smiled softly. "Goodbye, Aurora." Then he pressed the override button. The entire basement lit up like a sun had ignited inside it. Light poured from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Every bulb in the house burst in sequence. Windows cracked. The copper cage shimmered and then folded inward, vanishing like ash on the wind. And at the center of it all, the machine shuddered, and then it was gone. No explosion, no fire, just absence. A silence so absolute it felt like time itself held its breath. Michael woke on the front lawn. The house was behind him, smoke rising from the shattered windows. The siding was scorched. The front door was gone. Beside him, Eli stirred, groaning, one arm cradling his ribs. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the sunrise. Then Eli said, "Did we just kill a ghost?" Michael laughed once, bitter and soft. "No. We let her rest." Sirens wailed in the distance. They were coming. The men in suits, the people who wanted the machine, the ones who would try to rebuild what had just been buried. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. Because it was gone. All of it. Aurora. Victor's legacy. The field. The gate. Michael turned to Eli. "You still believe in ghosts, Eli looked at the house. "No," he said. "But I believe in memory." 3 weeks later, the house was condemned. The official story, a structural collapse due to outdated electrical systems. Michael didn't argue. He moved Leo and Becca into a quiet neighborhood 2 counties over. No more machines, no more journals, just sunlight and breakfast and silence. Sometimes Leo asked about the girl in the walls. Michael always told the truth. She's not there anymore. She's resting now. And sometimes at night he would step onto the porch and stare up at the stars and wonder. Had Victor really buried his daughter in a machine, or had he buried himself in his grief? Either way, Michael had done what he could. He had remembered. And then when the time came, he had let go. The final journal sat locked in a drawer in Michael's new home. On the last page, Victor had written a single sentence. Not about science, not about machines, but about the only thing that truly mattered. What we build is never as important as why we build it. And Michael finally understood. This wasn't a story about invention. It was a story about loss. About what happens when we try to keep the past alive, at the cost of the present. It was about the danger of memory without forgiveness, and the strength it takes to let go. So when the house finally collapsed in on itself for good, Michael didn't look back. Because some doors aren't meant to stay open, and some lights, no matter how bright, are only meant to shine once.